Connor?
Yeah, Steve.
What's the matter? You don't like musical comedy?
Is that a quote from the movie?
Yeah, it is. It's when it's in that crazy montage when he escapes his bed in the hospital.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I think that's him doing bargaining.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which we're going to talk about it. I have many qualms with this film. Most of them, not most, a lot of them have to do with the stand-up.
Yeah.
That fake Lenny Bruce monologue, because it's Bob Fosse writing Lenny Bruce material and not actually Lenny Bruce material. It talks about there's 5 stages of dying. It's not. It's about grief. It's not about dying. It's about grief. It's about experiencing the death from the other perspective. It's one of the... okay, we're going to talk about... Folks, welcome back to More Smoke, Please, where Connor and I... Well, the show's called Radio Rialto. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Connor and I are going through the 5 directorial feature films of one Sir Robert Fosse, and we've reached technically the titular film. The title of this miniseries comes from a set photo that I adore of Bob Fosse on this set, wearing a black t-shirt with white text that says "More Smoke, Please." I believe it's for the final huge musical review at the end. Today, Connor, we are watching
All That Jazz
from the year of our Lord
1979.
Yes. Connor, you probably talked about this briefly on the Sweet Charity episode. What is your experience with All That Jazz?
Now, this is the second Fosse I ever saw. Obviously, I heard about it from this program which I adore, Fosse Verdon, which I actually rewatched sections about All That Jazz today in preparation for the episode.
Yep.
I was lucky enough to get the Criterion as a gift, and I watched it, and I thought it was okay.
Yep.
And then I watched this time, and I thought it's a little more okay than I remember.
My experience was just knowing that this was Bob Fosse's autobiography. It had Roy Scheider in it, an actor I love. The reason it took me so long to watch it is because it's just not available outside of that Criterion DVD and Blu-ray. It's not streaming anywhere. It's not available to rent. I got an old ass DVD copy from my local library and checked it out to watch it for this, because the copy at my Barnes & Noble for the sales, the disc is loose.
Uh-oh.
I would have just bought it, but it's just I'll wait. I watched it and took a bunch of fucking notes, and we're going to talk about it. Connor, is there anything that you want to start with? General thoughts on All That Jazz before talking points, bulletin points? You usually get some dots.
I do. I mean, my positives are all just performances and just obviously that's the thing with Bob Fosse. Very well choreographed dance numbers in this movie. I had a good time.
Yeah.
In terms of performances, you're probably gonna think I'm gonna bring up Roy Schneider because obviously he's the guy. When I watch Fosse Verdon, there's someone I instantly connect with who I didn't think I really would, especially second time around, and that's Anne Reinking. And I love Mark Hawley's portrayal of her, but the actual woman herself, playing basically herself...
Yeah, she
is electric.
Yeah.
By far my favorite performance in the movie, followed closely by the one who's the Gwen stand-in, Valerie, which I'm terrible at forgetting her name right now.
Leyland Palmer.
Leyland Palmer, yeah.
Was
is
not
she
really
a stage actress?
Yeah, she's primarily a stage actress. This is her last film, and she lived for another 20 years.
Okay.
She just did not do a lot of movies, and she's quite good in a fairly thankless part.
Yeah. But as always, we mentioned the women of Fosse. Those are the two big standouts for me. Those are the positives. My one humongous negative, which obviously I get this is Fosse kind of reckoning with himself. You know that going in. No. I feel like there's definite points, especially the stuff at the end, where it is so incredibly heavy-handed, where it does not really work for me.
Yeah, let's just go into it, because usually I do cast first, but this time I just put Fosse down as my first talking point. This is Fosse as both writer and director, which he wasn't a writer. He didn't write all that much. He co-wrote this with the producer, Robert Allen Arthur, who is a playwright and a television writer, both in the New York scene. My assumption is that they just knew each other for a very long time beforehand. Developed this together. Obviously, it's incredibly autobiographical. Fosse was one of the co-writers for the book of Chicago, which I never knew that, actually. I learned that researching this. I don't think he's a particularly gifted writer. Most of my problems with this movie come down to the writing and the general conceit. And just to talk about your self-indulgence, for me personally, it is a pattern. I have a huge issue with autobiographical films, very openly autobiographical films, because it's the old adage that, like, to make cinema is to create gods. You're putting people on this massive 40-foot screen. There is a very distinct, lavish artistic intention with making a movie, just inherently. And then to try to approach autobiography, even if on the surface it is critical of oneself, is still inherently to deify oneself in some way. Because we'll talk about that insane musical number at the end. Because at the end it's like this insane musical number and this hard cut to just him in the body bag, which is supposed to be a gut punch. I feel like generally and we'll talk about this more as we go along, my biggest problem with this film is that I find it to be extremely intellectually stimulating, and I just cannot engage with it on an emotional level at all. It feels so distant, despite the fact it being inarguably Bob Fosse's most personal film, because it's just about him.
Yeah, I never once cared for Joe Gideon.
No, I don't hate him.
No, I don't hate him. I just don't really feel anything. I like the guy in the sense I'm compelled by him, but I'm not emotionally invested in him.
Yeah.
Like when the body bag moment happened, even when I saw it the first time, I didn't feel anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's obviously the big issue with the entire movie. And to
briefly mention, not to interrupt you, but the previous 25-30 minutes is this ode to, I'm dying, bye, like we're really droning out. It was like, yeah, all right, we all die, Bob, get in line.
Yeah, exactly. Which I love that final number of the bye-bye love, bye-bye happiness.
I love when he goes through the audience shaking hands, and then they do the like on a technical level and like performance and everything. I'm like, this is all stupendous. I wish this material could sing on its own.
Yeah. No, the scene I mentioned where you remind me of Patty Chayefsky. Mm-hmm. There's a scene in Fosse Verdon at the last episode where it's him and Patty sitting on a bench after Patty himself has had his own heart attack.
Yeah.
And they talk about the ending of All That Jazz and how it lacks catharsis.
Yeah.
And that's just how I feel with this entire thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't feel any semblance of like emotionality or catharsis when I see that final shot. I'm just like, oh, he's dead.
Yeah. No, I'm really glad you brought that up, because the entire time when I was watching this movie, it was like, and I imagine being Gwen Verdon, imagine being Michelle Fosse, imagine being like any of Bob Fosse's like colleagues or friends watching this movie, and just being like, is this how he sees it? Like, okay, like I was just trying to think, like, if Dan made All That Jazz, how would we react? We'd be like, all right, Dan. I mean, it's impressive, but like, I don't know. Do you want to see a therapist or something? Like, do we need to spend $40 million?
Just the thought of Dan's All That Jazz is incredibly funny to me.
Yeah.
No, because the funny thing is, I think about, I thought about it for a second. I remember obviously she's in the movie, but that bit where he says "I love you" to Kate, a.k.a. Anne, right before he goes into surgery, and he's like, "I didn't mean it." I thought about thinking about if you're Anne Reinking, if she wasn't in the movie, just watching that scene and knowing obviously that was a real moment that probably occurred between the two of them.
Yeah.
And he's like, and everyone, he said, "I love you too," and I'm sure Gwen obviously had her own reservations with that.
No,
but that just didn't feel good. I'm sure.
Angelique's line is, "Do you believe in love?" And Joe Gideon in return says, "I believe in saying I love you." What's the second part? It helps you concentrate. Concentrate. Yeah.
It solves all problems. You're able to move on.
Which obviously, yeah, like to your point, it's just like, yeah, that must hurt Anne Ranking, but also there was like dozens of others just like her before. Like you have to know. Like
Yeah.
I feel like if you're a woman and you're getting a relationship with this type of man, you at a certain on a certain level, even if it's not conscious, you have to know that's just part of the deal.
Yeah, and especially with I don't know how actually factual Fosse Verdon is in this way, but especially with someone like Nicole, his daughter, who like a lot of the moments in the movie between Joe and Michelle are just moments that she actually had with her dad.
Yeah.
And there was one point, I believe, where she was told she was going to be in the movie, then Bob changed his mind.
She is in the movie briefly.
Yeah, but no, she was going to play herself, air quotes, herself.
Yeah. Which I feel like that was a lot of people in his real life were, especially because they're in showbiz, were in contention to the point where Anne Ranking, he approached her to play the part, and then he made her go through several rounds of auditions to play herself when she is an actress.
That scene in Fosse Verdon is great.
Yeah.
The audition is incredible. No. But yeah, no, I can't imagine being anyone but Bob Fosse while observing this movie.
Or Scheider, because just the insane challenge of it's just because it's one thing to play all right, I'm playing a version of the director. It was nah, you just have to watch him to the point where that incredible cattle call scene in the beginning, and he's giving all the different directions, and it just seems so natural. And it's literally just Fosse has an earpiece, and he's speaking into a Scheider has an earpiece, and Fosse is speaking to a microphone, telling him to give the directions that Fosse would get. Here's what I would tell this person. Go tell him that. All the different, you watch them throughout the movie, and it's just obviously, we didn't know this man. All we have of Fosse is photographs and some archival footage that's out there, but even that is very limited. And just how he just gets down all those different poses, the kneeling thing that he does with the cigarette hanging, it is a masterful piece of observation.
Yeah.
We talked about Robert Allen Arthur a little bit, who ironically died during production.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's the ultimate irony of this film about the hypothetical death of its writer-director and parallels the actual death of its writer-producer. Both of his Academy Award nominations, which we'll get to in a bit, were posthumous. And then the last technical person I want to talk about is the director of photography, Giuseppe Rotunno. One of the most acclaimed cinematographers of the 20th century, and his main thing is that he was Fellini's go-to guy. And all that jazz, as it is a massive Bob Fosse's examination of his own life, it is also the ultimate example of his influence from Fellini, even though his first film is a remake of a Fellini film.
Yeah.
This is just, it's him going full Fellini. When I was watching it, was one of the many compliments I can give this film. It's so hard to replicate dream logic into film because everyone dreams differently. So a direct recreation of a dream can't even do it. You have to enter certain rhythms and certain patterns. And Fellini was one of the masters of creating dreamlike cinema. 8.5 is essentially a 2-hour-long drift through a man's life in this haze. And all that jazz with its sort of intercut throughout memories, and then we're going to this netherworld here and there, replicates that quality perfectly. So Bob Fosse, who was this obsessive, who probably studied all these Fellini films and then probably gained as much stories and details from Rotunno as possible, and stealing many of the photographic techniques that Fellini would use, especially in the late 50s and early 60s, and replicate them for this movie. It's the ultimate sort of Fellini pastiche of his career.
Yeah.
And I feel like this entire film on a technical level, it's just I don't like to use the word genius just because it is overused in general, but it is so clear that Bob Fosse is unquestionably a visionary.
Yes.
Because it's just how does I can't imagine not only anyone making this film in particular, because no one does Fosse like Fosse, but just making this type of film where it is so unabashedly I'm the writer, director, and choreographer. And also this movie is about me. It is about the last 3 years of my life.
No, and obviously the ego comes in big with that, obviously, in making a movie about yourself. Where you're spending $40 million to do anything about yourself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and no, it's just like there's a certain glibness to this movie, which I think Fosse was a very cynical guy. Where even in his dream sequence, one of the producers goes, "I can't imagine how much this costs."
mm-hmm.
And it's just like, yeah, Bob, neither can I.
God, what a crazy year for Best Picture.
Yeah, this, Kramer, Apocalypse, Norma Ray.
Oh, it was Breaking Away.
Oh, yes, of course. My beloved.
Oh, was Deer Hunter the year before? Is that what I'm thinking of?
Deer Hunter's the year before.
That's what I was thinking. Okay,
Which is
I knew
one
there
of
was.
the
I knew there was a Vietnam thing.
Which is one of the things that hurt Apocalypse Now, is that both Deer Hunter and Coming Home were the year before, and people were just like sick of Vietnam. Let's just go through the actors. I mean, Scheider, we've talked about him a little bit.
Yeah, he's very good.
He's incredible in this movie. It's so, like, everyone always talks about it, was like, you would never cast a Roy Scheider in this part. But like, knowing that it's Fosse, it's like Scheider at this point like almost exclusively played blue collar guys. He played like 4 different cops. He played gangsters, like very down the middle. And you watch Bob Fosse in interviews, and obviously he's a very intellectual, artistic guy, but he also looks like a butcher.
Yes.
Like, he's got a gruff with this like balding head and this big beard, and he has these big like forearms from all, like, he's like, obviously this, you watch him dance, he's extremely elegant and articulate, but it's just like he has that shabby like New York 1970s thing. I also, if we want to talk about self-indulgence, it's like, I'm gonna make my grand statement about my own life, but I'm gonna cast a guy with hair. Which, to be fair, like, there was no famous balding actors at the time. Like, actors have to be a certain level of vanity as well.
Wasn't Dreyfuss also considered for this, or is that something I just heard that was
Dreyfuss was cast. Dreyfuss was cast and then dropped out very quickly.
Okay.
So they just hopped the line to the other other member of Jaws. I think Robert Shaw might have already been dead at this point. No, I saw a couple other people that were actors. The one that they were also very considering, but I don't think they ever officially met with him, was Jack Lemmon. And then Fosse at a little point just went, he's too old. Which Dreyfuss is too young. He's like 33 at this point, which, granted, he looked much older because he grayed so quickly. But I don't, it's a much worse movie with Dreyfuss. I think Scheider is that perfect middle ground.
I agree.
No, it's one of the best performances of his career. Even though, like, Joe Gideon, unfortunately, he's just kind of a vessel.
Yeah,
He just sort of exists to like spout philosophies. But I feel like it is a triumph of a physical performance, just because his body language is crazy.
No, obviously he was in a very good place. He could just literally mirror the guy who's behind the camera.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see, like, obviously I don't think this exists. Just like footage of them just sitting down, just talking with each other. Fosse and Schneider.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think that exists because Fosse died, only 10 years later. But Scheider talked about this movie quite a bit. Like, I think he did like a commentary on the DVD. Like, it might be on your Criterion.
Yeah. I was like, on my Criterion, there's footage of Fosse directing the cattle call sequence.
Yeah,
which is very interesting.
That crazy, the spinning and the cutting between, some of those are so smooth. It's like I have no idea how they were able to do this. Obviously, you mount a tripod in the same place and you don't move, but it's just like that level of like precision. It's just like I don't think this is replicable. This is magic. Do you know who's second billed in this movie?
Is it Jessica Lange?
It's Jessica Lange.
Yeah.
Which, when I was watching the credits, I'm like obviously I love my queen. This was right before, because up to this point, like, her big thing was King Kong, but famously it like almost ruined her career. She was famously terrible in that movie. This was right in that she's like, after King Kong, was like, okay, I am going back to acting school. I'm starting from ground zero. This is like the one movie she made in between, because like 2 or 3 years later she comes back big with the 1-2 punch of Tootsie and Francis.
Yeah.
That's her big Oscar play year. And Postman Always Rings Twice. She had 3 very critically successful films all in a row, and she declared herself like, I'm one of the greats. Like, just when you ain't seen nothing yet, just when you had to be down, I'm coming back bigger and better than ever.
Which I do need to watch her King Kong.
It's terrible. It's one of the most boring movies I've ever seen in my entire life. And even, because here's the thing, Jessica Lange is not great in the movie. She is not as bad as people make her out to be, only because she is given nothing, literally nothing to do. The movie itself is atrocious, and the worst sin that any movie can commit. It is painfully dull. It is so painfully dull.
Because her and Bridges and it's painfully dull. It's just insane to me.
Her, Bridges, Grodin, and Rick Baker in a monkey suit. Like, you would think it would be... It's so boring. We talked about Anne Rankin a little bit. We should delve into her to more. I think it is a beautiful, poignant, naturalistic performance. On one hand, you could say it's probably very easy to play yourself. It's all just behavior. But also, it's just like you have to view instead of inhabiting a character, you have to view yourself under a microscope.
Yeah.
While
what does your boyfriend think of you?
While being barged by your lover. Like, it's like that must be a very high stress situation. I think she gives a splendid performance despite uttering one of the worst lines I've ever heard in a movie ever.
What's one of the worst lines?
Oh, you give all right. Presents, clothes. I just wish you weren't so generous with your cock.
I love that line.
It's
terrible, but I love that line.
And then he goes, that's good. I gotta write that down. And I'm like, no, it's not. And I know it's not because you're not a writer, Bob.
Well, I wonder if it was an actual thing that Anne said to him, and that's exactly what happened.
If not, Anne, probably one of his other lovers. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is probably something from your real life, but that should have stayed on the cutting room floor.
No, that same scene, though, has probably my favorite line in the entire movie. When she says, you go out with girls all the time, and then he says, but I stay in with you. So good.
It's fine.
It's not good in the sense like I see their relationship very clearly with that line.
Yeah, this script at its best I feel like is entirely serviceable.
It's good. It should have got a nomination for best screenplay. Probably not.
No, it's ridiculous. It's an egregious nomination.
But it's fun. No, the funny thing is, the generous with their cock line just reminds me of Valley of the Dolls.
Yeah.
It just gives me big Valley
Dolls.
Dolls.
And the part of the problem is that Anne Rankin is playing it so earnestly, and I don't want to blame her, because it's overall a very earnest performance. But, I don't think that approach is a wrong approach as an actress. It's just the material is failing her.
Yeah. It's a much broader thing.
It reads like camp when it's... Obviously, the line is supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be, dry and humorous. But it reads so far more broad.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And it's just like, Bob, you spent 8 months editing this movie. You couldn't, take a second look at that one scene?
It's a good scene, though.
It's overall a good scene, but it's just... I just hate... he does have to get back to the bathroom the way it's blocked out. I just hate... It was like, that's good. I gotta write that down. And I'm like, you're a director. You're not a writer. You don't, write down... It just drives me crazy. It drives me absolutely crazy. I almost opened the show with it. I thought it'd be humorous to ask you not to be so generous with your cock.
It's funny because the funny thing is with a lot of these people... that I learned really about Bob Fosse through Fosse Verdon, is my first exposure to Anne Rankin was not herself, but Margot Qualley.
Yeah.
Which I think is just very interesting.
Yeah.
Because when I hear Anne Rankin talk, I just think of how well she was cast, or just how good she is at impersonating Anne Rankin.
Yeah.
Their vocal quality is so vastly similar.
Yeah.
It's
especially because Margot Qualley, a similar build, but doesn't really look like Anne Rankin at all.
No, in terms of actual voice and performance, though, it's incredibly close. It's bizarre.
Obviously, probably one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie is that little dance she does with the daughter.
Yes, so great.
It's just and we'll talk about the daughter a little bit. But yeah, that's just obviously it's a lot of these people are professional dancers and Broadway actresses, and it's just yeah, Bob, just let them dance. At the same time, I feel like most of the musical numbers are at least a couple minutes too long.
Yes. The one before the last one, especially. The whole time he's in the hospital bed. That entire, those, 4 numbers that happen.
Yeah.
Just,
where, each one of these women has a song, plus, the doctors have a song, and,
yes.
That's what I'm saying. It's not even a musical. It's a musical review.
Yeah.
It's the last fourth of the movie. It's a 90-minute movie, and then this insane melody. Moving on from his lover to his ex-wife, the Gwen Verdon vessel, Leyland Palmer.
I like her a lot in this.
Yeah, she's pretty exceptional. I love the scene when he's having the nervous breakdown and she's doing her stretches. Because one of the things, like, Bob Fosse obviously directed a lot of comedies, musical comedies. I don't think of him as a funny guy.
Yeah.
So many of these scenes in this film are so, like, Borscht Belty. There's, like that, like, there's the heavy thing where the Paul character, who I looked it up, is based on Steven Schwartz. Very clearly based on Steven Schwartz. I'm like, of course it is. And that shows how much Bob Fosse really didn't respect Steven Schwartz at all, because he paints him to be the biggest schmuck in the world. But like where he's just having this nervous breakdown, and she's like, he's gonna be fine, and Paul's like, should I leave? This seems personal. It's like very, very sitcom-y, but it's done very, very well. And I think it probably helps that Bob Fosse used to be very good friends with Neil Simon, and probably just it's such a Simon clone, but done very well. And those two actors are masterful. The way the blocking is beautiful. There's a lot of scenes in Fosse Verdon where the director, who's the showrunner of that again?
Thomas Kail.
Thomas Kail probably just watched that scene. I was like, all right, let's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, because another thing to mention with her, it's the scene where she's the hospital number scene where she's dancing as he's playing the piano, and it keeps getting back to her watching him in the hospital bed.
Yeah.
That's just amazing.
Yeah.
Her doing a little goofy dance.
Yeah. And that little scene where they're talking about how they're going to have to shut down the show, and she has to, like, put on a brave face. I'm like, I know he's going to come back better than ever. It really speaks to, like, I don't know. Gwen Verdon should have gotten her own All That Jazz.
Yes.
It's one of the things I really appreciate about the show, Fosse Verdon, is that it's it's a little more heavy on the Fosse, just because his career was quote unquote more important culturally, but like they really give her the space that she deserves, especially just because, like, not only as one of arguably the most essential collaborator in his entire life, but also just this incredible artist in her own right.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where it's just like I can't, because I think Leyland Palmer does a very, very good job, but I can't imagine being Gwen Verdon watching this movie in a screening room. It's like, is that how he sees me? All right, there's worse. It could be worse.
Mm-hmm.
I think it shows that Fosse had a very distinct respect for her.
Yeah.
Because so many other people, if they were making their autobiography and they didn't get along with their wife or their ex, would just portray her as a nag.
Yeah.
She plays a very essential role in his life, and he is aware of that. I just wish she had more.
Yeah. Like we mentioned earlier, like, he always is shown to have very deep respect for women, Gwen especially.
Yeah.
And I think that just, obviously, that respect isn't really transferred to, like, giving her a lot to do, but the part she is given is, like, you can tell he really, like, likes her.
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes down to is that, from what I know about Fosse's early life, I mean, I don't believe he was raised by a single mother, but, like, his father wasn't really around.
Yeah.
We talked about this in Lenny, like a strong maternal presence. Like, we don't see much of Bob Fosse's early life in this movie, but we see his mother. And we see him working the clubs, and it was all these independent women. I think he has a strong respect for women as individuals in a way that not a lot of men did of his generation in general. But at the same time, because he viewed them as autonomous individuals in a way that other men didn't, it almost gave him, like, more reason to, like, take advantage of them, because it was like, because in his mind it was like, we're on an equal playing ground, but societally they weren't. I think he was taking advantage of women when he thought it was like, no, we have an understanding.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is obviously, it's something I didn't know the man personally, but I feel like that's fairly, I don't think that's much of a reach to glean from this portrayal of his own life.
Yeah, I don't think it's a reach at all.
Yeah. The last primary player I want to talk about is Erzabe Foldy, who plays the daughter, who plays Michelle, in her first and only film performance.
Oh, wow.
Never in another movie again. I think she's pretty good. I think she's pretty
dang good, yeah.
I think it is a, like, not cloying child performance at all. She is an exceptional dancer.
Yeah.
because there are like multiple numbers where she has to keep up with Anne freaking Reinking, like who like one of the most influential dancers of the 20th century, and like, she's holding her own entirely. Unfortunately, not much of a singer. It's not her fault. Some people got it, some people don't. Bob probably shouldn't have pushed her to sing her own song, but you know, it is what it is. Her song is also the worst song of the three.
Yeah, it's really bad.
It's lyrically atrocious. She's giving it her all. She's like giving a very sort of like Ethel Merman, Liza, big brassy energy. She works best when she's harmonizing at the end with Anne and Leyland. Because she's matching their energy. It's a beautiful. I don't know where she came from. I'm assuming she was like a New York theater kid and went all. I don't know much about her life. I know she's interviewed on that Criterion Blu-ray. I would love to watch it at some point. But yeah, it's a really good performance. That scene with her and Scheider, and he's like giving her all the like keep your leg down. It was just like. Apparently that's like one of the first things they shot too, and Scheider was like a nervous wreck because he's like, I haven't danced in like 10 years. Like, he's like, am I gonna pull this off? And the last little supporting part, because there's other people who technically have more distinguished roles. I don't know. They're kind of like obviously it was just like, this is a bunch of people that Fosse has to work with that he doesn't have a ton of respect for. The last person I want to talk about is Lithgow.
Yeah, Little Ty Lithgow part.
Yeah.
Which him and Wallace Shawn, I shouldn't say always forget. I've forgotten since last watching they're in this movie.
Yeah, but Wallace Shawn has one line. It's an important line where he mentions the fact that it was like, you could, like, the way the insurance is laid out was like, well, if he dies, you would actually go into profit. You can go into profit without the show even opening.
Yeah.
And then the producers just kind of looked at it and was like, yeah, that's something to consider. One of the other producers is the mayor from Ghostbusters. I forget his name, but I love that guy. But Lithgow is in that sort of middle realm. I was watching this because I just listened to that Mike Nichols biography. And I'm like, is he supposed to be playing Mike Nichols? He's not. He's supposed to be Michael Bennett, who was another very successful like musical theater guy. His most famous thing now, which would come after this movie, is Dreamgirls. He was the original director of Dreamgirls, but had been working in Broadway like basically concurrently with Bob Fosse, and apparently they had a huge rivalry.
Oh, wow.
Jonesy, the bald, grayed hair producer, is supposed to be, do you know Hal Prince?
I've heard the name. Probably
Hal
from
Prince,
you, but...
Yes, probably from me. One of the most important producers of ever in the history of Broadway. He was known as the Prince of Broadway. One of the biggest money makers in general, and was a very important collaborator to Sondheim. Like, did the original production of Little Night Music and Sweeney Todd, all the way through, Merrily We Roll Along. Very, very, very important producer. Did not get along with Bob Fosse. Bob Fosse does not seem like an easy guy to get along with.
No, not at all.
Just in general.
Which most of those like heavily like visual, like determined guys are.
Yeah.
It is their way or the highway.
Yeah.
And that's what makes him so great.
And the problem, but that's one of the things. It's just like that attitude works if you have the goods to back it up. Which
and yeah,
Bob
luckily
Fosse
he did.
Undeniably didn't. It doesn't work when you're, say, I don't know. Not to name names, but like guys who are known for being hard asses. It's the same. Brad Bird. Brad Bird, like anyone who's worked with Brad Bird is terrified of him. But every movie he's made has either been a massive critical success or a big financial success, with the exception of Tomorrowland.
Yeah.
But he followed Tomorrowland with the highest grossing animated film ever made until Lion King. Fosse made Ranking go through the audition several times to play herself, which is crazy. This one was on IMDb trivia. I don't know if it's true, but I found it interesting anyway. Apparently, the pill bottles like the pill bottles that we see that Roy Scheider is taking, the uppers, and it's Showtime. Apparently, the address on those bottles was his actual address. I don't know if that's true. I really want it to be.
That's great if it is,
because that's just incredible. And then this is another thing that was highly attributed on IMDb trivia. I tried to look up the source. It always led back to the IMDb trivia. There was a rumor. There's a line in the film very early when he's cutting and he's watching the his terrible version of Lenny, which, by the way, features the guy who played Lenny on Broadway originally. He did it as a favor, whatever. Do you think Stanley Kubrick ever gets depressed? Apparently, when Kubrick saw the film, he said it was one of the greatest films he's ever seen. I have not been able to find the source of that quote at all. It could be an utter fallacy.
Yeah.
But apparently, he liked the movie, so...
That's good.
Yeah.
Because this is probably that line writing something. The score that the class music that plays over It's Showtime, is that also the piece that's used in Barry Lyndon, or am I crazy?
Oh, that's a great question. Isn't the Four Seasons?
I see. I'm terrible with like naming classical pieces.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's Vivaldi. That's what my subtitle said. I mean, it's entirely possible. I mean, fucking Barry Lyndon uses so many classical pieces. He uses like 20.
Yes. It's very true.
Concerto in G. Vivaldi. No, a different Vivaldi piece. Cello Concerto in E minor, third.
Interesting. I'll have to find out where I heard that piece before. It's called, what was it called again?
It was Concerto in G.
Concerto in G. Yeah. So I'll look that up later.
I just realized that we totally glazed past Jessica Lange. We talked about King Kong and then we moved on. We didn't actually talk about her performance. I think she's good in the movie. She's playing an angel. Apparently her character is heavily influenced by Joan McCracken, Bob Fosse's first wife. So apparently this is who died very tragically and very young, about 10-ish years prior to this movie. So it's not just this like anonymous angel that he's having a conversation with. This is a woman that he's had a very close previous relationship with, which I found to be interesting. I found their conversations to be half very interesting and half really annoying.
Yeah, they're really interesting until they're not.
And again, I think it works best when Fosse is just going full dream logic. We're hopping between 6 different places. Like, it's one of those things, like, especially those moments where Scheider is talking to himself in the hospital bed, where he's giving himself direction. A lot of it is on the performance, but in any other circumstance, it would be so pat. It would be, like, so, like, oh, we get it. You're making this grand statement about life. But, like, it just has that just, like, what the fuck's happening? Like, you're just trying to grab, like, a grasp on any sort of reality. That it has that really effective where it's just, like, in the moment, you're not really questioning it. And then, like, 2 seconds later, it was like, wait, what is that about? That's, like, very dreamlike and very successful. That's all I have in terms of notes. You got anything else?
Not really.
Yeah, it's one of those. Like, I'm very critical in this movie. I think it's good. I think it's really good.
Well, because I saw on Letterboxd you have not scored it yet, but you've just liked 3 5-star reviews. So, like, did Steve like really love all that jazz and kept it a secret from me?
No, those are previous reviews I liked.
Oh, okay.
Those are previous reviews I liked. Which, here's the thing: I've liked reviews that I don't agree with before.
Yeah. Well, it was just the 3 5s in a row. There was no other ones,
well,
so I was
Connor,
like, oh, okay.
The crazy thing is, out of everyone that I follow on Letterboxd, some people I have on Letterboxd don't rate it. There were only 2 reviews that are below 4 stars.
Yeah.
Sorry, 3, including you. Below 4, there are only 3 reviews, not including people that didn't rate it. My beloved film critic Dave Kerr really did not like this movie, but he didn't give ratings. Leonard Maltin gave it 2.5 stars. And then someone else I follow gave it 2.5 stars, and you gave it 3.5. I don't know where I fall, to be honest with you. I don't know if it's 3.5. I don't know if it's a 4. Because part of my problem is, like, I have my issues with the script. I think it's visually stunning on a technical level, all the performance, everything. I find this, like, I can point at scenes. I can point at, like, 12 different things that I adore about it. I find this film to be very intellectually stimulating, which obviously I appreciate. I want to be intellectually stimulated by a film. But emotionally, I find it to be kind of inert. The characters that I connect to the most are the 3 women, which I think Bob Fosse wants you to connect with them, obviously. He features them prominently for a reason. These are 3 women that, like, the movie is basically about a man and the 3 women that matter most to him.
Yes.
Professionally and personally.
No, because for me, the film is ironic that once the technical movie ends, my, like, involvement just decreases dramatically.
Yeah.
And I think that's, like, the movies, like, I was rewatching it recently today, and I was like, oh, of course this is a 4.
Yeah.
Like, the shit they're doing here is, like, how did I give this 3.5? And then once the review happens, like, oh, that's why I gave it a 3.5. I was like, this goes incredibly unfocused in the last part. And as much as I love Goodbye Happiness, it doesn't really make up for the 20 other minutes I was just kind of bored. No, still Sweet Charity, still the number one for me.
Yeah.
It's a good movie.
Yeah, never in a million years did I think that was going to be like our mutual. I think I might. For me, it's between that and Cabaret. I like Cabaret more than you do, but not like Lenny or all that jazz is bad. It's not that I think I have to land on a 4 because I gave Lenny a 4, and I don't think this is worse than Lenny.
Yeah, I like Lenny a little bit more than this.
Yeah, it's just one of those. It was my thing when I bumped Manhunter to a 5, and I had Silence of the Lambs at 4.5. I'm like, it can't be like higher than they have to be on equal playing.
Yeah. No, I get that. I'm excited for Star 80.
I am fascinated and terrified by Star 80. Just knowing that real life story, I have no idea how the fuck he's gonna handle it.
It's interesting it breaks the streak. Because he had 3 Best Director, Best Picture noms, then Star 80 just had nothing, correct?
It was critically mixed, leaning towards positive. I think it was one of those. There are some movies where controversy is the best thing that could ever happen to it.
Yeah.
And there's other movies that a controversy can just kill it dead on the water. I think that movie coming out literally within 2 years of the actual murder happening, it's just people are just no thanks, goodbye. Yeah. I don't want to touch this. They got no Oscar noms. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nominated for the Golden Bear at the Berlin International Film Festival, and that's it. And a Golden Globe nomination for Eric Roberts.
Yeah.
Who I believe plays the murderer and not the Peter Bogdanovich character.
I'm incredibly excited to watch that and to finish off a very interesting filmography.
It's strange because, obviously his most impactful work was his theater work culturally.
Yeah.
But it's crazy because, these movies were, they made money for the most part, and they were very well received. It's just, I feel like he has not talked... part of it is probably just because he's so, everyone thinks of him as, the dance guy, the theater guy. But, considering how, talked about they were in their time... it's kind of crazy, with the exception of Sweet Charity, which was a bomb by all accounts, how these movies don't really get talked in canonical terms, with the exception, really just Lenny. Lenny isn't talked about as canonical. Cabaret and all that jazz are considered canonical. But how Fosse isn't thrown in that 70s auteur conversation the way that Friedkin and Lumet and Coppola all are.
Yeah.
Spielberg. It's because all these movies are good. They're doing really interesting stuff. They're doing really, really unique stuff. And with the exception of a Cabaret, which is unquestionably his most culturally continuous film, and then this is very well received within film people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that he as a director isn't thrown in that conversation of the greats that often. I think it just comes down to it's very short filmography.
Yeah.
When you don't have 16, 30 movies that you've made, it's hard to stick in the craw as much.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I mentioned before, the film got 9 nominations, tied with Kramer vs. Kramer for the most nominations. It won 4 of them. It won art direction, which it beat out both Apocalypse Now and Alien. Which this movie, very well designed. I think I would give it to Alien.
Yeah, probably.
But horror movie, science fiction, there's probably a lot of Academy members that just didn't watch it. Costumes, editing, which it also beat out of Apocalypse. This movie is very edited.
Yes.
Usually I mean that as an insult. But obviously I think all of these films are pretty impeccably edited. But this movie is very flashy in its editing. That's kind of a problem with the Oscars generally. Editing doesn't go out to best editing, it goes out to most editing a lot of the times. I think this can apply to this film, but I think it works overall. And then score adapted, a category that doesn't even exist anymore. And then the 5 nominations that it lost are picture, Scheider, Fosse for direction, screenplay, and cinematography. which I really don't question any of these nominations except for screenplay.
Yeah.
It's
Screenplay's a little bit. It's not terrible, but yeah, there's definitely, I'm sure, better movies that didn't get the nom that year.
Yeah. In screenplay, it lost to my beloved, the previous mentioned Breaking Away. I forgot that it got a picture because I know it won screenplay, and it was like a crowd favorite, but it didn't get that many nominations. I forgot it got picture. 70s were an interesting time, man.
They were.
Very interesting time for movies. Well, Connor, thank you for joining me again on this journey. I've been looking forward to this conversation all day. Every time we have one of these chats, I'm like, "Ooh, I get to talk movies with Connor." And then next time, we're at the end.
Yeah,
We've
Star
reached
80.
the end of this very depressing rainbow, and it's only gonna get more depressing.
Yeah.
Oh God! Take your Zoloft or whatever freaking pills he's
Dexedril.
popping. Dexedril. Get some Dexedril and watch Star 80. And Connor, and until then,
Well, Steve, the odds against us is 100-1.
Connor, those are the best odds I've ever had. So let's clap it up.
Let's clap it up.
3, 2, 1. That's pretty close on my end.
Sorry, Bucky.
It's pretty close on my end.
I was a little ahead on yours, but on mine. But I think we're fine.
To annoy Sydney and amuse myself, I started doing this voice. I created a character. His name's Toby. He likes to go frog catching, and rock flipping to catch some grubs. And I was trying to think, it was like, what is the most ridiculous thing I could say in this voice to annoy Sydney? And I just go, hey, and she just went, what? And I'm like, you ever seen my Peepaw's gizzard? And then she's like, this guy only talks about 3 things. He talks about frog catching, rock clipping, and his Peepaw's gizzard. What, like, doesn't he have any other, like, sort of hobbies? And I'm like, you ever read Proust? Jude the Obscure? I got my book learning. All right, now we can start.
Speaking of Jude the Obscure, I'm watching Talented Mr. Ripley tomorrow, and I'm jazzed about it.
It's, I hope she does. It's crazy just how good Margaret Qualley is in general.
Yes.
And just like, here's the thing. I like Andie MacDowell in a couple of things. It's just crazy how much leaps and bounds a better actress she is than her mother. It's like kind of wild.
No, it's on like My Salinger Year, which is not a great movie by any means.
No.
She's just very good in it. She does a very good job grounding that material.
Yeah.
Or even something like she's I've watched a lot of things I shouldn't watch that are just very bad and not worth your time. But even things like those, she's fun. She's good in them.
Yeah. Especially because like a character like Pussycat, which is just like, how the fuck would anyone ever approach this? And she has such an effervescence. And and ranking. Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
But I was gonna show you. In the middle of this, Erica handed this to me. Bucky's been shedding, and he has like a little like claw casing.
Oh.
That I've been like, I've been holding it in my hand this entire time.
Interesting. I didn't know cats did that.
Neither did I, because we got Hunter. He'd been declawed not long after we had him. Apparently, they shed like their like. We would call them his toe knives, but he shed his toe knife.
Interesting.
I think this one's like they're not usually this intact.
Yeah. Because it's not the actual claw; it's just like the outer layer of
It's
skin.
like the outer casing. Yeah.
He's molting. Like a crawfish.
He unsheathed his toe knife. Also, when we were talking, he had a nightmare. He like jetted up in bed.
I heard that. I heard him make a noise. I thought he sneezed or something.
No, he full on just had a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah, your line is, well, Steve, the odds against us are at least 100 to 1.
100 to 1.
And then I'm, those are the best odds I've ever had. I'm double checking my notes to make sure. Talked about Giuseppe Rotunda. Talked about Jessica Lange. Oh, I didn't talk about the Oscar nominations. It's the only thing I skipped over. Do you want to
talk about that real quick? Yeah, sure, why not? Well, you froze right as you said, well, Connor. I was like, am I supposed to give the line? Or?
You were froze right when you were giving your line. I was afraid. I was like, oh, we're going to have to start this over.
No, we got it. I'm watching Noomi Rapace have alien surgery.
Oh. Is that kosher?
Is that kosher?
Oh, Ace Ventura.
No, I don't think Erica's liking the Prometheus very much, but I enjoy Prometheus.
I can't. I can't.
What are you thinking of Prometheus?
There's people who like them Prometheuses.
Yeah. No, I forgot how good this Blu-ray looked. There's
It was on the TV. She's not watching it on a
Yeah,
laptop.
she's watching on the TV
So
in front of me.
Every now and again, you were looking up, and I'm like, I assume it's like she's probably grabbing something or something. I didn't realize you're just watching Prometheus silently while we're talking.
Well, because I'll just see, like, Michael Fassbender playing basketball, and I'll just look up for a half second. Oh.
It is wild, because I knew Ridley Scott was heavily involved with Blade Runner 2049. I didn't realize it was almost a coin toss of whether or not he was going to direct that or Covenant.
Yeah. I think they made the right choices both ways.
Here's the thing. They probably made the right choices. I would be very interested to see Scott's 2049 and Villeneuve's Covenant.
Yes. Here's the thing.
I'd be very interested to see.
The thing is, Scott's 49 would have suffered, but Villeneuve's Covenant would have been incredible. That's the difference.
I don't think it would have suffered. I think Scott could have done 2049.
Oh no. Here's the thing. Villeneuve's Covenant would have been fucking insane.
Would have been crazy.
Gosh. No. Good fun movie. I need to watch The Fifth Element. Yeah. Not related at all, but there's No Air Pace is wearing like this one like Leela wears in that. Yeah. This reminds me of that.
Oh shit, I gotta stop recording on my phone.
Oh, so do I. No, Erica's not liking it to the point she just checked the time.